ultimately all of us want success in the work we're doing. We don't want to do mindless work. The people that I've met involved with drug and alcohol abuse prevention work or the treatment work, the recovery work, really, really want to do well. And they want to succeed. And so I created this thing called the Pyramid of Success.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mid-America PTTC podcast. I'm your host, Dave Clausen, and I'm the director of the Mid-America Prevention Technology Transfer Center. Dr. David Anderson, Professor Emeritus of Education and Human Development at George Mason University, is our guest for this episode. At Mason, he served as professor and director of the Center for the Advancement of Public Health. He acquired over 180 grants and contracts, along with teaching courses on drug and alcohol issues, health communication, and community health. His professional work on drug and alcohol misuse, prevention, and wellness promotion spans over 4 decades. His specialties include strategic planning, program development, needs assessment and evaluation, along with health communication. His research, writing, and training emphasize leadership skills, grounded and practical strategies, and healthy environments to maximize organizational, group, and individual potential. We're also excited to be hosting him for our event on September 26th, titled Creating Change, Empowering the Leader Within. And for those listening, we would love to have you. You can find out more information about that event and register for the free training on our website. But before we get into the content today, we'd like to thank our funder, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration. And a quick note, although funded by SAMHSA, the content of this recording does not necessarily reflect the views of SAMHSA. Without further ado, let's get into the episode. All right, everyone, and I would like to welcome David Anderson to the podcast. David, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Dave Clausen. Glad to be here.
Yes, indeed. It's a pleasure to have you. And during my introduction, I shared a little bit about your background, but I was hoping you could dive a little bit deeper and let the audience know some of your rich history and experience when it comes to prevention work.
Thank you. Actually, I started in this work nearly 45 years ago. I remember doing a program in a residence hall that I was running at The Ohio State University, and I called it All About Getting a Good Healthy Buzz and Other Ways of Getting High. Now, this was 1975, and things were really different then. The National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism and NIDA were just founded a few years before. A lot of the prevention messages weren't getting out there. But what I found when I offered that program, which was really about alcohol and drug abuse, was a lot of students were interested. They showed up. They may have showed up thinking that they were going to get high there, but it was really about how do you get high on life and how do you find a lot of satisfaction and joy with life without the use of drugs or alcohol. So that was something that started my work with alcohol and other drug issues. My paid work was running a residence hall, and from that I went and ran other residence halls, whole residence hall systems, and then I moved to a faculty and researcher role, and through all of that I was interested in doing some research about drugs and alcohol in colleges, and then the broader community, and then teens, and so over that career, it was 1979 that a colleague and I said, what are other colleges doing about alcohol? And then 3 years later, we said, I wonder what they're doing about other drugs too, and then tobacco. And so every 3 years we do a survey. It's called the College Alcohol Survey. And another colleague and I did a teen drinking study. And so a lot of my work has been around alcohol and other drugs. It's been about wellness and health promotion, well-being. It's been about connecting the research with the practitioner, whether that's training or writings. And a lot of my work is posted up on my George Mason University website. I retired from there almost 4 years ago, but the website is still alive and well. It's www.caph.gmu.edu. So the work there, the work that I've done, and it's all about connections, it's all about applications, and it's all about being practical. How do we take the theory, how do we take the knowledge that's out there and make it understandable by the practitioner or by the the person who's a volunteer, an interested person in the community. So I know we're going to be talking about something today in this podcast, and I think that's relevant to people at all levels. Again, if you're in a formal leadership position or if you're a community volunteer. So that's a synopsis. I think there's more on my university website, and certainly more available to talk about, and a lot of that will unfold in our discussion today, Dave.
Yes, indeed. And for the audience, any links that we reference throughout the podcast, I'll include those in the show notes. So they'll be there readily accessible for you to check out the other websites. I love your rich history from starting in the residence halls and the satisfaction and finding joy in life. That's powerful.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's very powerful.
Yeah, and the intent was to connect with students because I felt them drinking and drugging and virtually all the problems I had as a residence hall director, virtually all the problems I had, drug and alcohol related. And I think they were really seeking something else, and they really didn't need drugs or alcohol to achieve what they really wanted to achieve. I had incidents with people getting beat up. I had incidents, sadly, at that same, a subsequent residence hall. I had incidents where someone actually died from a drug overdose, and I had to help carry her body out of the residence hall building. I had an incident when I was at Radford University in Virginia where 2 of my 4 full-time professional staff were killed in a car crash by a drunk driver. So a lot of this propelled me, seeing a lot of missed potential with young adults and trying to, if you will, go upstream and try to work with creating a different kind of environment and helping professionals create a different kind of environment for the people that they're working with, so that drug and alcohol abuse is minimal.
And I can hear the passion in your voice, and it's carried out through your life's work. And just hearing just those little snippets of those tragic events, it's very admirable how you have channeled that passion to really create and do good, to create that change.
Thank you. It's
that.
Really a life's work, and it's really you're right. It's a passion. It's a real love to try to help make our world a little bit better, a little bit happier, small pieces at a time.
Now, you had mentioned a couple things as well, talking about connecting the research to the practitioners, making things very practical. And as it relates to leadership across the board, do you see something from the research or a foundation or framework that really helps folks be successful when they're working in prevention?
I'll tell you what I see is, first of all, I see a lot of good professionals out there and a lot of good non-professionals, a lot of good, if you will, volunteers in the community, if you will, an untapped resource. But I see a lot of people who really want to do well. They want to do good work. But what often gets in the way is they may not be up to speed. Some people may be very well-intentioned, but not know the latest science, or they may not have confidence in themselves to speak up and to speak out. So to go directly to your question, what I see is that I started to create something that kind of bubbled out of observing groups and individuals and working with them. And I call it the pyramid of success, because ultimately all of us want success in the work we're doing. We don't want to do mindless work. The people that I've met involved with drug and alcohol abuse prevention work, or the treatment work, the recovery work, really, really want to do well, and they want to succeed. And so I created this thing called the pyramid of success. It has 3 elements. It's a visual. If you could have a visual framework, you can imagine a pyramid, just actually 2-dimensional, but it has 3 points in it. Like if you picture the lower left, that's competence. If you picture the lower right, that's confidence, and up in the peak, the 3rd point in the triangle is commitment. And so, what I find is that sort of framework helps, because we need all 3 of those. And for myself, I need all 3. As I work with others, I try to help them. That's the connection from the research to the practicality. Help them build their competence, their skills, their confidence, and their commitment. All three of those. And I found that whether it's my work with the federal government or state groups or consortia at the state or local level, community level, with individuals, with business groups, all three of those, competence, confidence, commitment, all three are needed. All three are needed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, to me, it helps guide some decision makers and anyone wanting to make a difference. So, you think about a different, if you will, a different setting. Think about an airline pilot. Think about a doctor. Think about a school bus driver or, someone stocking shelves in a store. We want good competence. We want the skills. We need to have the skills of an airline pilot or a doctor. We want him or her up to date with the latest. We want them to believe in themselves. We don't want a doctor to say, well, I don't really know. But we also want them to be confident in themselves to say, there's three different points of view on this. If we were to operate, if we were to do this, if we were to treat it holistically. So, we want them to be competent and skilled. We want them to be confident and just be able to speak up. And then we want them to stay committed. This prevention work in particular, it's hard work. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of uphill battles. There's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of naysayers. There's a lot of people whose experience, people we're trying to reach, a lot of their experience is different from ours. And that may be all that they have to go on. And experience might be 20 years out of date or 30 years out of date, or their knowledge may be what they were taught in high school or college or in the community and through the life experiences 40 years ago. It may not be the latest science. So when we're thinking with doctors or airline pilots or lawyers or teachers, we want them competent, confident, and committed. And then for us in prevention, we need all of those. Can you imagine, for example, if you have a visual of a stool with three legs? What if you only had two? What if you didn't have confidence? It wouldn't be very sturdy. It would be falling over.
Yeah.
Sitting on the floor. But if you didn't have competence, but you just had a blowhard who believed in him or herself, and then they kept at it, but there was no competence, what's that all about? Mm-hmm. What if it was someone who claimed to be a doctor or claimed to be an airline pilot, but they had no skills? That's pretty scary. But what if, on the other hand, they had good competence, but they didn't believe in themselves? Mm-hmm. It's like, I'm going to fly this plane today, but, we'll see how we dodge those clouds and those storms. I'm not so sure. It's kind of makes me kind of scared. We don't want to hear that. Mm-hmm. We want them really to be skilled. We want them to have done some good practice. We also want them to be committed. We love that experience. The experience makes a big difference. So we need all three of those. If any of those three is missing, and again, particularly in prevention, because it is such an uphill battle, it's a hard sell, we got to stay with it and keep feeding ourselves with new knowledge and new energy and new resources and connecting people and keeping at it. It is hard work. But it's certainly worthwhile. We are making a difference. So again, this framework, pyramid of success, competence, confidence, and commitment, just like a three-legged stool, we need all three for ourselves and for those around us.
Yes, indeed. And I like how you directly hit on, this is hard work. We as professionals, we can get worn down. We can get tired. It is that uphill battle. And that's where I love, though, we're all on a team when it comes to prevention. We're here to help support each other as well.
Right.
I love the concept, the framework, the pyramid of success, just narrowing it down to those three things. And when us at the PTTC are working on our training plan, we look at, what does this offer? Does this help build competence, confidence, or commitment, or a mixture of all three? So I'd love to know more about the background.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned, from working with prevention practitioners, at the higher ed, community level, state level, you've seen these common themes and you developed the pyramid of success. But could you share a little bit more about the background? Why was it developed?
Yeah.
How was it developed?
Well, yeah, it's really developed, in my work, again, with alcohol and other drug issues for about 45 years. It was 1975, as I shared. Mm-hmm. It's really designed to help people continue their good work. I saw so many people who had good ideas, but didn't share them loudly, or they didn't share them outside of small group. But they had good ideas. They just weren't confident in themselves. Or they may have been competent. They may not have had the competence because they didn't have training. If we look at our higher education programs today, there's hundreds of them preparing professionals to go in the field of student affairs. And they're going to work in student activities and residence halls and in advising, not the counseling side, but in more of the proactive, wholesome development of young people and of returning students too. But none of those have a required course on alcohol and drugs. None of them have a required course on wellness. A lot of the precursors to drug and alcohol problems like stress management or time management or assertiveness skills, none of them have a required course. They may take a course, they may get some skills. And most professionals in the field in higher ed say they have some knowledge, but it's not current or it's not the latest science. Mm-hmm. I have a couple books out on that about wellness issues for higher education, and they're up on my university website that someone can learn more about them. But having that competence, having that skill is often missing. I've talked with colleagues who are in the business arena, and they're saying, our people getting their MBAs don't have this sort of training in wellness, and they're going to go into the work site, and they're not really well prepared to work with their employees from a wellness, a proactive stress management, time management, organization skills, managing human relations. So part of this, I saw a lot of turnover. People in alcohol and drug issues would be doing their work. They might be in it for 2, 3, 4 years. They're learning the skill because they weren't trained in it. They may have gone to a conference for a few days and gotten some workshops. They may have gone to a specialty training, and that's great. But then there was turnover. So they didn't stay with it. So they faced a lot of obstacles. They just didn't have that commitment. Or I saw people in some of my volunteer work and some of my other consulting work, I saw people who were making decisions and I thought it was not for the right reason. For example, when I was on a community board in a county in Virginia as a volunteer, and I was the chairperson of the Substance Abuse Committee, the chairman of the board came in and says, "Here's what I want to do with drunk drivers. I think we should just lock them up." And I said, "Sir, with all due respect, that's not what the science tells us." And by the way, that scenario was over 20 years ago. The science said we don't just lock them up. If there's a convicted drunk driver, there's other things that we do. Jail time may be part of what we do, but just locking them up and, if you will, throwing away the key isn't the answer. That's not good competence. Or I remember sitting in a meeting and I heard a federal official say, "Well, here's what I think we should do. We should have an initiative dealing with middle school kids because my son's getting ready to go to middle school." Well, that's not good science. That's not good competence. That's not a good reason to have a new national initiative. We may need something for middle school. Indeed, we do. That has to do with alcohol and other drugs. But just because your son is going to go to middle school is not a good reason. That's not good competence. So again, part of the background is just witnessing people without the competence or without the confidence or without the stick-with-itedness. Here's an example from a training I did. One of the experiential activities was having people do a 3 or 4 minute segment to convince a panel of quote-unquote judges. These were all workshop participants who'd been together for a week. And it was one of the culminating experiences. And so they were to convince them of the value of their proposal. So people prepared their materials. And this one person, I remember it so clearly, she was making the presentation and the panel of judges was just not getting it. Just not getting it. she really outlined what she wanted to do, and they just weren't convinced. And I went up to her and I whispered in her ear, "Do you trust me?" And she looked at me kind of quizzically and said, yeah. And I took away her notes and walked away. And she had this panic look. And I said, "Continue, please." Within 1 minute, the panel supported her argument. And she said, "What did I do? What happened?" And the panel said, "You spoke from your heart, not from your notes." So in a sense, I share that because that's part of the confidence. She didn't believe in herself. She read her notes, which really wasn't showing her confidence and showing her commitment. Once that got revealed, the panel accepted it because they needed to know not just that she knew what she was talking about, but that she owned it, that she believed it, and it was from her heart. All of those make a difference. You know, when we're doing training, we're trying to pass our prevention work. You know, I think it's important to have good data, but have good stories. Both are important. Mm-hmm. And when she did that, she had her data, but she didn't have her story. So for her, it was her heart. Mm-hmm. You know, she's teaching others now. I follow her, and she's teaching others in a motivational way. Mm-hmm. I expect that was a turnaround experience for her. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. So again, thinking about what can we do to build our competence and our confidence and our commitment, and then thinking about those that we're working with in our coalitions or our work settings or community settings, college settings, school settings. I think that can really, really help.
Yes.
I hope that answers your question.
Oh, absolutely. So many thoughts have been sparked.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
Stories are so powerful, and thanks for sharing those specific stories. I think they really do highlight the 3 pieces to the pyramid of success: real, practical, real world stories and examples. But yes, there's so much value. We need to pair stories with the science.
Yeah.
Now, I know we've talked offline a little bit about building out a training plan that addresses all 3: competence, confidence, and commitment. Mm-hmm. Can we break those down one at a time, just a little bit more in detail, and maybe some sure. skills and practices, ways our listeners can build their skills on their own?
Sure.
All right.
You know, with competence, it's a matter of having good knowledge and then staying up to date. So that means reading research or reading things that help keep you up to date. It also means looking at other fields of study. So if you're in higher education, looking at secondary school or looking at business. If you're in secondary school, look at higher education. If you're in working with student athletes at the high school, college, or community level, what can you learn from other groups that work with that type of audience? Or what can you learn from the pros? Or what can you learn from other settings that might apply to your setting? Looking at where areas of controversy are. Particularly in alcohol and drug issues, there's lots of controversies. There's lots of misinformation. There's lots of new knowledge. I mean, we didn't talk neurotransmitters 30 years ago. We didn't know about the teen brain, and brain's not being fully developed until 25. At least that's how we know it today. But that, decades ago, we didn't know that. What's the knowledge going to come out as we do more science on marijuana, as more and more research gets done, short-term and longer-term effects? A lot of that we don't know. As new drugs appear on the street, what do we know? So learning the new science, learning some best practices, not just copying what the neighbor school or community or state is doing, adapting it, learning from their challenges. So that's, being competent. It also means, like, if you're going to plan something, if you're going to plan an event, or you want to do something, a policy, why? Is it grounded? Is it grounded in best practices? Is it grounded in some evidence that someone has tried it before and gotten some good success? That's great. But if it's not, that doesn't mean don't do it. So don't be limited by the fact that it may not have been done before, because you might be putting things together from two or three different sources and saying, I think it'll work here, and here's why, and here's some of the theoretical grounding, or here's some of the other experiences that we're putting together, and we want to try it here. But have some good grounding rather than the feel-good grounding. So that's competence. Mm-hmm. Confidence is really belief in yourself. It's self-efficacy. If you go back to theory, you'll see that in the health belief model, self-efficacy. We see that in several different models. But confidence, believing in yourself. That example I gave from the training where someone, trying to convince a panel of judges of the worthiness of the proposal. She didn't believe in herself, so she was reading her notes. And again, knowing your content so that you can speak up and speak from the heart really makes a difference. Confidence, and this feels a little awkward for many people, but it's you have the knowledge, so it's you believe you have the knowledge. You also know by having knowledge how much you don't know, but so many around you have less knowledge than you. So it's a matter of speaking up, it's posing some questions, it's doing queries, it's challenging, it's finding ways to challenge or finding ways to encourage others to challenge. It might be comparing notes with someone who's very like-minded, so that when you get to a group setting, you're speaking up. A couple of you are speaking up and challenging. So many people in higher levels are even more distant from the latest research and knowledge. So confidence, believe in yourself. The bottom line for me is if you don't speak up, who's going to speak up? If you have knowledge and you don't speak up, who's going to speak up? And then commitment, that's hard. You listen to your heart, you listen to what difference you're trying to make, try to stay refreshed, find ways to manage your own boundaries, manage your parameters, find ways that you can stay renewed, whether it's having a weekly or monthly lunch with people to, again, stay renewed. Or one of the things we did when I was in Virginia, we had a statewide coalition. We decided to meet once a year. We had semi-annual drive-in workshops, but we met once a year just for renewal. Literally 25 of us from probably 20 colleges around the state of Virginia would sit in a circle in a rural retreat setting with no cell signal and no TV. So, and literally this was not 1950. This is like, over the last 10 years. And we would sit and we would talk and we would renew and we'd eat together and we'd go on a hike and we'd renew. And that's so important to realize there's so many other people facing the same things or slightly different things. And you get support from your colleagues, and many of those colleagues become friends. So the other part of commitment is thinking both about the large picture that we're all about and then some small successes. We can move the needle just a little bit on whatever we want to try to measure with our needle. I think also part of commitment is understanding the alternative points of view, the different points of view, the controversies, trying to understand them. And, some pieces of what they might say or believe, you try to fold in. And if it doesn't work with the current science that take a look at it, dive a little deeper. Some of it you might change. Some of it you might try to find other ways to convince them of your way. But I think all of those are important. I think a lot of these, it just takes practice. It takes stick-with-itedness. It takes maybe some journaling. So how can I be more confident? How can I work on my confidence? And how can I stay with it? Because we need these, the people who have a lot of historical knowledge and a lot of perspective to say, here's what I think now as I reflect on the last 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years.
Yes.
I hope that's helpful. Some of those are specifics.
Absolutely. And when you're breaking down each one, I had reoccurring thoughts. And so it seems to be a theme, especially for me in my own development, when it comes to all three, competence, confidence, and commitment. I have to remind myself and be very intentional and purposeful about staying up to date. What can I do to know my materials better so I have the confidence to speak up, and really being intentional about unplugging and having that chance to recharge, because we
Yeah.
do. I see time after time in the prevention field, we're so passionate and committed to work. We work, and we burn out.
Right. Exactly.
Self-care is so important, but you got to be intentional about it. And that last piece too about commitment. Um, I like to say you've got to take time to celebrate the small wins.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
trying to
Yeah.
create such big change in prevention. We can overlook and just breeze through those small wins that show, hey, we really are making progress.
Absolutely. 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 Yes.
Yes. So
Yeah.
I'm feeling energized just from this conversation.
Good. You're committed. You're committed. Good. Good for
Yes,
you.
indeed.
Good for you.
Well, how do you see folks implementing or using the pyramid of success?
I think what we just highlighted, and let me just circle back around, a lot of it is self-reflection.
Mm-hmm.
So look at your own competence, where you need to grow, where do you need to get more current. You'll never know it all. Do as best you can.
Mm-hmm.
So that's competence. Work on your skills. That's self-reflective. Your confidence is practice. It's finding some relatively safe places that you can speak up. If you're getting ready to, here's the extreme. It might be testifying before Congress. That's pretty scary.
Mm-hmm.
Or testifying before state legislators, or testifying or making a statement before a town council. Well, so some of the practice may have nothing to do with alcohol and drugs. So maybe with the town council, you're going to go and you're going to speak up about the need to replace the swing sets in your local park. But you're getting practice testifying within if you will, typically it's a 3-minute window. So you're getting practice coming up to a podium and speaking to a governing body. So practice in some other areas. When you go to a workshop, you go to a training, volunteer to practice. Sure, you might make mistakes. It might feel awful, but that's the safest place to do it before it really, really, really counts. And that's not to say the swing set isn't important, because it really is. But it's your own practice, building your own confidence. I did it there, therefore I can do it at the state house or to the town council or U.S. select committee on X or Y. And then the whole idea with commitment, reflection, how your work's important, celebrating. Just you were just talking about the small successes, but that's reflection on yourself. The other piece is as you look around you, as you're looking at your work group that you're with. Again, whether it's a volunteer, whether it's your position, your professional, or your community role. Look at those around you and say, where's their competence? Again, if you're looking at a committee, you may not all be competent in the same way. I've been on a committee with law enforcement. I've been on a committee on that same committee with someone who's in athletics and someone else who's in counseling and someone else who's in health. Those are the specialists or the experts and the people who have the day-to-day interactions in those particular settings. I need to listen to them more because each of those 4 are not my specialty. So what can I learn from them in terms of their own competence, or even making the inquiry? Tell me more about the setting that you're facing and the experiences you're facing as a law enforcement or as a healthcare provider or as a counselor or as a judicial administrator or as an advocate or as someone in the news media or someone with high-level administration. So what are the things that are important, and how do we find some common ground to move forward? So again, looking at answering your question, how can it be used? Looking at yourself and then looking at those that are around you, whether they're part of your team or those that you're trying to convince, and then understanding that they may not be particularly competent or they may not be confident or committed, and what can help build that so that we're all on the same page moving forward and moving towards the same outcomes with shared outcomes, if you will, with the whole prevention of drug and alcohol abuse problems.
Yes, I really, really like it, and I enjoy how versatile it is. Like you said, the self-reflection piece, or for looking at your team or your specific project team or coalition, what area do we need to build the most? Almost like doing a SWOT analysis
Yeah,
around.
exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly, a SWOT analysis. That's a very good analogy. Yes.
Yes. Oh, I like it. I like it.
Good.
You
I do
have.
too. I keep using it. I keep using it.
Yes, and you also mentioned you've got to practice. And I was actually delivering a training yesterday, just a brief sort of motivational interviewing training, and we of course spent some time on reflections. And I explained, it might not feel natural at first to use reflections, but you've got to get your reps in. And one good way to get your reps in is to start sprinkling some reflections in just your day-to-day conversations with your friends, family, and loved ones, and see
Mm-hmm.
and feel the impact of just one good reflection. And that will build
Mm-hmm.
competence,
Mm-hmm.
your confidence,
Absolutely.
and your commitment to use them more. So
Mm-hmm.
got to get your reps in. Very important.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Well, we're nearing the end of this episode.
Yeah.
What sort of final thoughts or final ways in which this can be used, or last thoughts related to the pyramid of success, or even just leadership as a whole?
Yeah. To me, it's essential with leadership. As I think about leadership, leadership can be an elected or an appointed position. Leadership can be something formal. You're the chairperson, you're the coordinator, you're the liaison, you're the designated person. Leadership can be someone who's a member of a group. He or she's not in a designated position, they're just a member. But leadership can also can be if you're not a member of a group. You may be an attendee, you may be someone who follows. So how can it apply? If we think about that self-reflection of a person who is a leader, a designated leader, making sure he or she is, self-reflection up to date, making sure that they speak up and that they stay with it, and that they persevere. That's the commitment. If you're a leader, again, whether you're a leader or a member of a group, trying to make sure that the group as a whole and those who are in the designated leadership slots are competent, are confident, and are committed. Go to your area of strength. I serve on a board where one of the persons is long-term CPA. Guess who we trust with accounting questions?
Mm-hmm.
CPA. That's appropriate. I happen to do a lot of research and writing. Guess who mines the data a little more than others? And guess who writes monthly articles? I think you can answer that question. But so looking at where the pockets of expertise are. So leadership, I believe in shared leadership, and we have different areas of expertise.
Mm-hmm.
And we rely on the experts, the different areas of competence to lead in that area. Again, if there's different points of view, great, we can talk about those. So I think with leadership, it's some of the examples I gave a little bit ago are strategies that can help nurture each of those. And then we as a group or one as a leader can help promote the nurturing of each of these three with that group. With a competence, sharing readings and with one another, or going to conferences or lectures and podcasts like this, some continual review of all of our competence. Are we up to date? Do we know the best practices? Are we following those? And trying to ensure that. And if you're not on a steering committee or an advisory group, but you're one of the followers, speak up and share some of that with those in the leadership groups. The point is, anyone can be a leader. The confidence, having people speak up, calling on them, saying, so-and-so, you've been silent, or I haven't heard what your point of view is, or, sometimes people just need a little nudge, and then that might help increase their own confidence. Some of this is, again, practicing in more private settings or, workshop settings, and it's like trying on a new pair of shoes. That doesn't feel good at first, but then you get some confidence, you kind of break them in. And commitment, we set our goals high and low. We set large and small, something we call the low-hanging fruit. We want to make sure we have low-hanging fruit, but we also want to see the big picture. If we're driving across the country, we want to make sure we're basically still heading in the right direction. But pay attention to the landmarks along the way. Celebrate our accomplishments and give others some kudos along the way. So, and there's a related note, and I don't have this on my website yet because it's not yet published, but it will be out in September. And it's a book called Leadership in Drug and Alcohol Abuse Prevention, Insights from Long-Term Advocates. And that book, this is the practical piece of it for me, is, after decades of work in alcohol drug issues, 5 years ago, I embarked on a project of interviewing people who've been involved for 30 to 40 years. And then I got some shorter 1,000-word essays from practitioners around the country, different walks of life. And this book is arranged, its 12 chapters are arranged around the pyramid of success. I have 6 chapters under competence, 3 under confidence, and 3 under commitment. And it's trying to bring to life the practical blend of what the knowledge and what the expertise of people who are the experts or have different insights, maybe some disagreements, but also a lot of inspiration, trying to bring that to the practitioner at the community level, the campus level, state and federal leadership level to provide more leadership around drug and alcohol abuse prevention. So it's hard, and hopefully some of the inspiration from many of the people who've gone before us can help to propel through the pyramid of success people in the future.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm glad you referenced your upcoming book. I'm excited to see it go into print as well. Talking a little bit more about just leadership in the field and that commitment piece. For the listeners, David Anderson is coming to our region for empowering or creating change, empowering the leader within. Because as we had actually mentioned, we are all leaders. So I'll go ahead and include in the show notes a link to that event. It's on September 26th, 2019 in Kansas City, Missouri. In addition to David Anderson, we'll have Carlton Hall there as well. Carlton's going to just break down, when exposed to the same tools, training, and support, why is there a disparity between the high-performing leaders, organizations, and coalitions and the low performers? And then what are the unseen routines, thinking patterns that lie behind the most effective and successful leaders and coalitions? So a great dynamic duo. We'd love to have you. That link for that registration will also be in the show notes. And I'll tell you what, David, my mind is running full speed. I feel energized. I love it. And the pyramid of success is so versatile and adaptable. Where can folks, find some more information about the pyramid of success?
Well, you'll see that in the book Leadership in Drug and Alcohol Abuse Prevention, which is published by Routledge, ROUTLEDGE, Routledge Publishers, and you can cite my name or cite the book title, and that's out in September 2019. So you can read more about that there, and that'll also be referenced on my university website at George Mason. That's caph.gmu.edu. And then just as a side note, I know I'm doing another podcast on change. It's called Planned Change. And, I think when we're talking about change and we're talking about success, that's what we want. We want success. And in order to get there, some things have to change. Some of it's within ourselves. Some of it's with how we do things. Again, the competence, confidence, and commitment hopefully can all change in the desired direction. And I think reading into the leadership book, each of the 3 sections, I have an introduction to what each of those 3 is, like the 6 chapters on competence. What does competence look like? And then that's what the 6 chapters are all about. The book is a lot of in-depth, but also very, very practical. Even though it's 150,000 words, it's really meant to be hands-on, not a checklist format, just some good grounding to help build the competence, and then some grounding to believe in yourself, and some tools there, and some things will help you stay with it, stay refreshed. So there's not a simple magic place to go for information on that, but I would point a listener right to the leadership book. Again, that's going to be out very, very soon, early September 2019.
Exciting, very exciting. All right, well, hopefully everybody took good notes. If not, the good thing about a podcast, you can hit replay and listen to this episode. Oh, got to use technology. All right, well,
Absolutely.
Let's go ahead and wrap this episode up. Thank you very, very much. Tons of value, and the stories you shared are so relatable and important. Great lessons learned there. So thank you very much for your time and sharing your knowledge with us.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you, Dave.